interview with June Isaacson Kailes by Francis Lomas Feldman in the library of the School of Social Work. June, I would be interested in knowing first how you came to enter social work.
Well, I was interested in working with people, and when I was in graduate school, or no, in college, I thought I majored in psychology. I was interested in counseling and that kind of thing. So, toward the end of my college degree, I had a lot of time. So I started to audit some graduate courses. I was always interested in disability too. And so I audited actually I took some graduate courses in rehab counseling. And I decided that was definitely not for me.
Where was this?
On Long Island, Hofstra. And so there were great courses because you got to go into New York City a lot and visit all kinds of human service organizations related to disability. And so I saw what a limited field rehab counseling was. I decided I definitely didn't want to do that. And I thought that master's in psychology would be too limited too, because that's basically was just counseling and psychological testing, and that seemed too narrow. So social work seemed the broadest degree with the greatest flexibility. So I applied I wanted to get out of New York. So I applied I looked around for places I wanted to live, precisely places with better weather. That was the number one criteria. So I considered Florida, coming from the East Coast, but I truly felt that Florida had kind of a backwards way of looking at civil rights and tolerating human diversity, and had kind of a racist Southern quality to it. I didn't want to go backwards, I wanted to go forwards. So I thought California might be a more progressive place. So I had a friend who had graduated the year before. She was in LA. She wrote me letters saying it seemed like a really nice place. So I applied to graduate school, social work at NYU and USC and UCLA and Toronto. I always liked the city of Toronto. So, and Illinois too. And I got this letter from the University of Illinois saying, this was really interesting. It said, "We're considering your application, but we need a doctor's note saying you're okay to go to graduate school, that you can do that." And so I wrote them back and said, any graduate school that requires a doctor's note in order for me to be accepted to that school is not a school that I want to go to. Thank you very much. So I crossed that one off.
Did you get a response?
No. Then I got an interview at NYU. So this was very memorable, the NYU interview. I had to get up and go in the city for the interview. So I get up early in the morning on Long Island. I get outside, and the entire environment is covered with ice. Everything is iced over. And so I'm clinging to the wall to get to my car. So I get to the Long Island, all dressed up. I get to the Long Island Railroad, and I have to park across the street. And it's sheer ice, and there's no way I can get across the street. So I find this homeless person. I say, "Can you help me across the street?" So I get across the street, I get into the city, I get down to the village, Greenwich Village, and I'm crossing the street to get to this interview. And this bus comes along and goes through this puddle of slush and just covers me from head to foot with slush and everyone else standing there. And I think, I want to get the hell out of here. I don't want to live like this. This is not quality of life. This is about oppression in the weather. So I go and I get the go for the interview at NYU, and it's a group interview. Very interesting. Group interview students, and that's it. I did that. And I get a letter, and they're offering me a scholarship to go there. And I think, I want to get out of here. I don't want to stay here. So then, I finally get a letter from USC. Late, you're accepted. Sight unseen. Well, to be frank with you, I didn't know USC from UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I thought I'd heard.
That's a true New Yorker.
I heard of UCLA. USC just seemed like I know what it was, but I never heard from UCLA. So I had to make some decision. So I said, okay, I'll go to USC. They never saw me, sight unseen, just accepted me. I said, all right, oh, it's LA. So,
What year was this?
1971, 71. So I just came out here sight unseen. Never been to California. Never. Just knew it sounded like a great place. I figured if I didn't like it, I'd go back. So I get here. I had somebody drive my car across the country because I decided I was going to go to Europe with some friends for a while and then get back and just go over. So my car never arrived here. I mean, I know where it was, but somebody was driving it across the country. So my roommate said she would drive me here the first day. Well, she got sick. So I had to take a cab to USC first day from West LA. Yeah. And so I took the cab, and the cab driver said, well, I don't know where the School of Social Work is. Yeah, nobody knew anything, so he just dropped me off in the middle of the place. And first person I saw, I said, do you know where the School of Social Work is? And she said, no, but I'm looking forward to. So we're still good friends. And that was it. So I came to school here.
And you did the 2 years consecutively.
Right.
Yeah. Where'd you have your field placements?
Well, the first one was, you come here the first day, you get your assignments, and and I saw a piece of paper and it said Rancho Los Amigos.
Yes.
And I thought, a ranch? What do I want to go to a ranch for? I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it. So Rancho the first year, and LA Child Guidance Center the second year.
2 good placements.
Yeah. And then I went to work at Rancho after that.
Oh, did you? I was going to ask you what your first job was.
Yeah.
What were you doing there? Was Elspeth Kahn there then?
No, but she was in and out a lot. I knew her. And I worked with her for years, training medical students. But she was not the director anymore. Ruth Brunnings.
Oh, yes. I didn't know her. I just know her name.
Yeah. Well, that was an interesting experience.
And what did you do there?
I worked on neurology, medical social worker, for about 2-3 years.
And then?
And then the director and I didn't hit it off that well. I wanted to do a lot of experimental things, and I was always getting into trouble.
What kinds of trouble?
Well, I was young. I didn't have a lot of job experience. The first thing I did was I went to the director and I said, I'd like to change my supervisor. I think I could learn more from that one than this one. And she looked at me like, what is wrong with you? So that didn't work. And then I would get in trouble because I started to run groups on sexuality and with psychologists. Well, apparently there was some kind of unwritten rule that social workers and psychologists didn't work together. And that was a no-no. So something else I did very wrong. And I just didn't, I wanted to push the limits, and it wasn't a time where that was acceptable. It's a very kind of a inflexible setting. And so I thought, well, this isn't going to work, I'm not being tolerated here very well. I probably won't move on anywhere, so I'm going to try something else. So I went to Olive View Mental Health, and I worked there for 2 years in the Valley. And that was an interesting experience. I learned a lot there too. I learned a lot at Rancho too. And then, but I wasn't real happy there either because it was, my primary work was inpatient, and it was detox, and it was for alcohol and substance abuse, a little bit of outpatient, which I liked.
It was no longer just the TB hospital then.
Oh, no. And so I learned a lot and made good friends, but then I was still restless and didn't feel right, and the staff were just kind of not the social work staff, but the staff I worked with were kind of just putting in their time and, loved to leave at 4 and, to the clock, and they weren't a very creative group, and it just didn't feel expansive enough for me either. So I, during that time, I got involved with a group that was beginning to look at disability and civil rights, and beginning to plan to offer alternative kinds of services to people with disabilities that didn't exist anywhere. And that was the beginning of WCIL in about 75, 76, we started getting together.
This is before we had legislation.
Well, yes. So, this is about, I think I was still at Rancho. I saw a lot of people being forced into nursing homes unnecessarily. A lot of very medical model approaches of disability. So got involved in independent living, and we were able to get federal money by 76 to start a center. There were 10 regional centers in California. It was innovation and expansion money, federal money, that came to the state, and then the state distributed it. And so that was the beginning of...
Did they distribute through Department of Rehabilitation?
Yes, yeah. Now, it was interesting, the federal government said, you can't use it for this, to the state. And Robert said, watch me. Tough. And so that was 3-year money. That was 3 years of funding. So there were 10 original centers in California. And then as that money was used up, the 10 original centers worked to get state money into the budget, the state budget, to fund these centers when there was no longer federal money. And that's how it all began in California. And so by 78, I'd been on the board and doing this and helped to write the grant. I really wanted to work in that system and not for the county and not mental health. And so I wrote a couple grants and finally got one funded to offer a peer support program at the center. So I left the county.
Under what auspices would this be?
You know where that money came from? The original money came from Helen Levin. Remember the Levin Foundation?
Yes.
Because when I was at Rancho, remember Arnie Beiser?
Very, very well.
Well, Arnie used to do in-services for Rancho. And so he pulled me aside one day and he said, look, there's somebody, I know what you're doing, and there's somebody you need to know. You go see this person, Helen. And so I did. You know, I didn't know who she was or what to expect. So I went up there with kind of dressed like this, you know, jeans, t-shirt, and the maid answers the door, and another maid shows me in, and another maid gives me a drink, and I go, whoa. So, anyways, I told Helen what we were doing. She was really interested. I told her some of the things we needed. I laid it out for her, and she just went ahead and did it. And
had she already gotten her MSW?
No, this was way before that.
Long before that.
This was way before that. So, and she told me there was some money, and if I wrote some grants, maybe we could do something. So I did. And she got some of her friends involved in this volunteer work I laid out for her. The next time I came up there to see her, she had all these people working on it. She had her own little thing going. So, the original funding for the program I started came from her. And then years later, she said to me, I'm thinking of getting some kind of counseling degree. I'm thinking of going to the California School of Psychology or something. I thought, well, Helen, that's good, but, you know, social work is a more diverse degree. You can do, you know, you might want to consider that. And she said, I never thought of that. She said, well, think about it. You know, think about it. So it was me who kind of pulled her in the other direction to think about this. And so she was involved for a long time.
I knew her as a student as well as afterwards.
So, and she was on the board, and, you know, originally we had to raise money just to get through the year, to get the second year money and the third year money, and so she was helpful in all that too. She was a real fine.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. And we would disagree and we would fight, but we got along. It was an interesting relationship. So then after that, I went to work there at the Westside Center for Independent Living, and then I became the director after that.
You didn't start as a director?
No, although a lot of people thought I did. I must say that.
Yeah, I thought you did.
No.
Well, who was directing it then?
There were a few people. first there was Doug Martin, and then there was Neil Jacobson for a year, and then me.
Oh, so I didn't come on the board until you were the executive.
And what year was that? Don't know. Well, it had to be between 81 and 89.
The early 80s.
Yeah. So, so I was there for about 8 years, and I got, I learned a lot. I didn't know a whole lot about management, but I learned very quickly, and then I did get tired of it after about 7 years. I found that I was doing a lot of management maintenance and management, what I would call management minutia. And I really felt that it was only 25% of the time I was doing what I really wanted to do, which was advocacy and public policy change and training and more hands-on work and writing. And so I'd always done some consulting during those years on the side, and I just really got tired and thought, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm just tired of it. So I just decided to go off and see what I could do on my own. And I've been doing that ever since, for 9 years.
Is it that long?
Yeah.
Well, tell me what you're doing.
Well,
what you have been doing.
Most of my work is with people I've always worked with before. Just natural outgrowths of things I was doing, kind of as a director, where you...
organizations and individuals?
Mostly organizations. So I do a lot of training. Most of my payment are subcontracts under government grants. So I do a lot of training for independent living across the country. I'm a training director on a government grant. We're into our second 3 years of funding under Rehab Services Administration, Department of Education. So that's about 30% of my time. And then I work for a research and training center on aging with disability at a Rancho. And I do a lot of the dissemination of information to people with disabilities. And that's about 10% of my time right now. And then I do work with the Research and Training Center on Managed Care and Disability. And that's out of Houston, Texas, and Washington, D.C. And that's about 15% of my time. And then I'm a part-time federal employee. I have a Clinton appointment to the Access Board that deals with architectural codes in this country. And I don't know what percentage of time that is, but it's there. And then I do a lot of little things on the side, like I do some work for the Getty, or some work for shopping malls, or work for helping businesses implement ADA. I've done work in the field of assistive technology and disaster preparedness for people with disabilities. And I've done some work for the LA food and shelter programs in terms of looking at their sites and working with them to make them accessible. So a lot of, I'm not bored. A lot of variety.
What title do you use?
Disability policy consultant.
And how do people know about you?
Primarily word of mouth. Yeah, word of mouth.
Okay, that's your professional side. Now, will you back up and tell me about your own disability status?
Okay, well, I was born with CP, cerebral palsy, so I've always lived with a disability, and it affects my balance and the walking and my coordination. And so it's a disability that supposedly stays the same, doesn't really get any better or any worse. However, as you get older, things do change, and there are surprises that you never anticipate.
For example?
Well, anybody who gets older, their balance isn't as good as it used to be to begin with, right? So if you take that and you add that on to somebody who doesn't have good balance to begin with,
so it
all of a sudden there's a major impact that's not expected or predicted. So, and when you use your body in atypical ways, you've got to have more aches and pains and that kind of thing. So, I've actually done a lot of work in that area of writing about it and saying, hey, you gotta get on this early so you can begin to prevent some of these things, and you can predict what's going to happen, and there are preventative kind of things that can mitigate these problems. So I've been doing a lot of work in that area too. So when I travel half the time. 50% of the time I'm out of LA. So about 5 years ago, I was getting these jobs in shopping malls and at the Getty, and I found I just couldn't walk around those huge places. So I started to rent a scooter, and then I decided, this is great. Why should I waste the energy walking when I can use this? So I got a scooter, and that makes traveling a lot easier because I can carry
it in your car too.
Yeah. I can carry the computers and the training notebooks and the suitcases. So I use a scooter now. And probably if I was still on this campus and had to walk around a lot, I'd use it here too. Probably should have used it a long time ago. Would have saved a lot of energy and time.
It sounds like a marvelous expedient.
Yeah, it is. But it's a value system problem. People in our society value walking to the degree where it's not even functional. And so people just don't think about better options. So, you can walk until you drop instead of being more, the value is walking instead of mobility, when the value should be mobility.
Okay, I want to ask you to back up again to personal experiences. As you were growing up, what kinds of situations did you encounter because of your disability, and how did you deal with them?
Well,
what kind of a family picture did you have?
I had a mother who was very assertive and just wouldn't take no for an answer. So she would just go out and fight for whatever I needed. And I had a father who was pretty careful. He was always, be careful, the opposite of me, not a real risk taker. And I had a younger sister. But in terms of disability growing up, I was mainstreamed in third grade, before there was any such laws. And I determined that it was better not to acknowledge disability and not to ask for anything special, because if you acknowledged you had a disability, then people would treat you differently and you wouldn't get to do what everybody else got to do. Therefore, it was better to not say anything and just pass. So I did that for years and years until I got to college. And it was, ridiculous at times, but I had it in my head, and I got it from society that, the only role model I had was somebody who walked around the neighborhood selling pencils. And I didn't want to sell pencils. So I thought, I'm not going to do this. I don't want anything to do with that. So instead of asking for things that would make it easier, I didn't. Unless my mother intervened and said things like, you are going to get 2 sets of books, so you don't have to carry one home in the snow. Or, you are going to learn to type early so you can keep up with writing. That kind of thing.
So she was looking for ways where you could be self-sufficient.
Right. So, I'm sure she did run interference for me with the school district and all that kind of thing. And I do remember applying for the job once, a job in the library once, and not getting it because they said I couldn't carry the books or I couldn't climb a ladder. Well, those were the days when I was a teenager and I was still not willing to acknowledge that I was different, so I wasn't going to fight for anything. Plus, there was no ADA, where it would be a very easy accommodation to just give me a step ladder with a railing or a push cart for the books, So I felt that was a real job discrimination experience, but I wasn't ready at that point to fight.
When did you become ready?
In college, when I met a lot of other people with disabilities who were on a campus that was supposedly, quote, accessible, but it really wasn't. It's one of the campuses that got money from the Ford Foundation to eliminate some architectural barriers, but what they defined as accessible and what people needed were 2 different things. Until I met a group of other people with disabilities in the late 60s, and this was actually my experience paralleled the experience of many other people across the country who for the first time met other people with disabilities on campuses and started to make some noise about what wasn't right. And the time was right.
You joined forces with others then.
Because this was, we had the Vietnam War, we had the consumer movement, we had Ralph Nader, we had the beginning of the women's rights movement, all these messages about fighting for rights and civil rights. It was a natural. So that's in college. My friend Maury said to me the other night, he said, I remember you came to me one day and said, there's no elevator in this building, and these steps are awful.
We were in the old law center.
Yeah.
Came.
So he said he went to the president or something, and he said, I've got this student, and she's really complaining. And they said to him, well, tell her to file a lawsuit or something. And Maury said, well, consider that done. Then what? Nothing happened, though. But it was I forgot about that.
Yeah, they did finally get an elevator in that building, but you must have gone.
Yeah, I remember working with people on this campus to do those things too. But this was a very slow go on this campus. This campus is a mess.
The whole campus.
The whole campus is a mess. no access initially.
But is that still true?
Well, I haven't done a survey here, but I assume things are much better. They'd have to be. You'd have to comply with the law.
Yes, because we have many paraplegics, for example.
Yeah, I'm sure.
On this campus, and I haven't heard any complaints about anyone getting around.
Yeah, this is you'd be in court a lot if, because this is a resource-rich campus. They'd have no excuse at all.
That's right.
None.
Well, tell me some of the things that you've encountered. No, I guess really what I'd like to know is your view of how society attitudes have changed about disability. What you see in that picture.
I think that younger people are more accepting of disability because they've grown up with students, friends, side by side in the classroom. And so it's more of a natural occurrence of the human condition. But I think for the most part, attitudes don't change very quickly. It's the law that changes people's behavior. What really convinces me of that is when you travel outside the United States and you observe new construction, things like the Sheraton or the Hard Rock Cafe or many hotel chains that have had to comply with access in this country, and yet right outside the borders for a new building, they've done nothing. It kind of tells you that the law is what makes the real change, and the attitudes just don't change that quickly. It's scary.
It is scary.
But it's very blatant. It's just like just hits you. Like, you think they get it, that it increases their market, it increases convenience, it's better design. And they don't get it. It's shocking. It's shocking to me.
Are there still pockets in the United States where this is a problem too?
All over. Because the laws are only enforced by the people who need them.
Yes, and I imagine state by state.
Well, and the federal government is so backlogged with enforcement. It's a mess. It's a mess. So unless individuals take things in their own hand and get lawyers to do things don't happen very quickly. I mean, there have been changes. You can see them all over, but it's still too slow. When you talk about attitude change, it's real.
Say that again.
When you talk about attitudes, I'm not convinced. Long time ago, I stopped putting a whole lot of energy into attitude change and just realized it'd have to be in the legal laws changing, because people have to obey the law. Changing attitudes could take 25 lifetimes.
How much are you involved then in efforts to change laws, either through court action or through legislation?
Actually, through legislation, regulation, worked on the regulations for the Telecommunications Act, Section 255, that mandates that telecommunications services and telecommunications equipment has to be accessible to people with a variety of hearing, vision, motor, cognitive kind of disabilities. And that's brand new, and that's far-reaching. That's the information age. That's the next century. Those are the curve cuts of the next century for people with disabilities. So I'm working on that. I'm working a lot on strengthening the access codes through the Access Board, which is a federal position, part-time. And then there's a move on to move money, redirect funds away from nursing homes into better community-based services for people so they can get what they need to remain in their homes in a non-medical model kind of a service system.
What kinds of agencies do you see providing such service?
You mean for a community-based? Well, so far they're real medical model agencies. I mean, home health agencies. They really need changing. They really need. A lot of it is so medical-based and very overpriced. And if they would relook at the system, a lot of help that people need, a lot of the help people need to remain in their homes does not need to be medically based. And if it was covered by insurance, there'd be a lot of people who could remain independent in their own community where they want to be instead of being forced into nursing homes. So that's a major push right now in legislation. That's HR 2020. That's going on.
2020, that's a significant number, isn't it? What do you think about 2020 vision?
Yeah. Hopefully we'll be there before then. And then there's other legislation pending that revamps the Social Security system and takes away some of the work disincentives. A lot of public policy in this country has a welfare mentality. It makes people dependent instead of independent. It's very much of a disincentive program instead of an incentive to go to work and keep the benefits you need. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's not going to happen in our lifetime, a lot of it.
Well, I'm afraid it won't happen in mine, but I'm still an optimist that it will happen.
It will, but we're talking a long haul here.
Your comments about home-based care reminds me of an oral history interview we had with Elspeth Kahn, which I was editing last week. And she was trying to make arrangements for people at Rancho to live at home who really didn't need to be in the hospital, but they had no way of maintaining themselves at home. And she was trying to persuade the State Department of Social Welfare to make it possible for them to go home. One of the phrases that she used, which struck me and stays with me, is that there are two kinds of people who don't do housekeeping. The ones who are very rich and don't have to, and the ones who have the physical ability to do it and need somebody to help them, but they don't have the money to pay for it. And this was the argument that persuaded then Elizabeth McClatchy to make state funds available.
That was in 1956.
Yes.
That was the beginning of the home health,
That's right.
in-home support services program in California.
Yes.
They looked at all the polio people that were still in Rancho, and they determined that if they gave them $10 a day, that these people could be out of the hospital on their own, functioning independently, supervising assistants, and not having to spend $50, $60 a day for hospital care. That was a revolution in California.
Yes.
in the 50s. That goes all the way back to 1956. That was a benchmark time that happened. That's why California is so far ahead in terms of in-home support services. But it's not enough. I mean,
No, it's not enough. How else do you think we can deal with this need? I presume there are efforts underway.
yeah, I'd like to see, well, coalition building. I'm trying to build coalitions with AARP and other groups of clout to ensure that new legislation redirects and revises the current service system to make it more usable and responsive to what people want, instead of what some provider system says they need.
What can the ordinary lay person do about it?
Pay attention and become more politically active and write letters and make visits and, the old slow go, the old lobby. Tell your own stories. Tell how it makes life better quality of life. Saves money in the end. Force people to think about their own situation. So, that day Elspeth, I always thought that she was pretty progressive. She seemed to understand some of this stuff. She used to bring people over to the center, medical students, just to see what the real world was like for people with disabilities, not in a hospital where, people are sick and looked at as sick.
There's enough of that being done these days.
No, I stopped doing it because it was taking an enormous amount of my time, and there was no money to reimburse for it, so no. Medical students get 0 disability content.
So since Elspeth left the medical school, I think there hasn't really been a replacement for her.
Well, I'd be glad to help. But how is she? Is she okay?
Not very well at the moment. I don't think we've had many pioneers in medical social work like Elspeth since she left. And evidently it's something we need to have operating again.
Well, I was looking at these questions you sent me, and a couple of things I wanted to comment on. The question, what is your view about measures social work profession can undertake to affect programs, policies that would be more or less effective? Well, I don't think that the field of social work has played any kind of significant role in the area of disability rights. And it's been real disappointing to me. And I found the field to be, when it comes to disability, for the most part, as paternalistic as the rest of society. And I've had several opportunities to people ask me to participate in helping to change that, NASW or some of the rest. And I decided not to, deliberately, because that relates back to attitude change and a very slow process. And life is short. And I'd rather just it's hard enough to decide where to put your energies to make significant change. And I decided that that was not significant enough for me. So some people are pretty angry at me about that because I've just said, no, I'm not going to do that. It's not going to make enough change in my lifetime to merit my energy. And matter of fact, In a lot of the work I do, social work still has a very bad image, a very poor profile in the world of disability, to the extent that often it's more of a liability to put that degree after your name than to leave it off, because there is such deep-seated resentment and anger about some of this, We know where some of it comes from, and if you probe it, a lot of it relates back to the medical model. A lot of it relates back to a social welfare perspective in terms of instead of an enabling perspective. And it's too bad. I remember in the 80s writing a letter to NASW saying, the newsletter saying, look, you keep talking about minority issues all the time. You never mention disability. You never mention civil rights for people with disabilities. You mention blacks, you mention children, you mention Asians. And I got this scathing letter back saying, well, disability is not a minority, it's like a medical condition. And so I said, look.
That's an unenlightened view.
Fine. I'm not going to fight this fight. It's not worth it. It's not worth my time. It's not going to make that big a difference in the end. So I kind of walked away from it.
Is this something that schools of social work can do something about?
Yeah.
Particularly a school like ours.
Yeah, I think there needs to be more enlightened disability content in the curriculum. And I think it needs to be taught by people like me or people who come from that perspective and really will present a very different kind of a concept and philosophy and value system and perspective. Because it can't be taught by someone who hasn't been there.
We, for a number of years now, I don't remember a year when we haven't had at least several people who are clearly disabled have had to use wheelchairs to negotiate their way around. And some, of course, who have other kinds of conditions that I don't see. I don't know what they do in the school that could help to build awareness.
Well, a lot of people who are new to disability or haven't really affiliated with others who have disabilities don't come to the world of disability with any kind of civil rights perspective. That's not exactly intuitive. And something you need to really think about and take a kind of a leap toward. And a lot of times you need some help to get to. A lot of people with disabilities walk around this world apologizing for you having to build a ramp so they can get in the building. They don't see it as a civil right. They see it as some problem within them. So I think part of the issue is that there are a lot of people who live with disabilities who haven't been exposed to the whole civil rights perspective and are still walking around having to apologize all the time or think they have to apologize instead of, when you go into a theater, you have the right to ask for and get an assistive listening system. It should not be something you have to beg for or apologize. It's your right. Loss of hearing is a very natural condition that we all will experience if we live long enough. It's not special. It's not different. Everyone's going to have that problem, particularly our generation who puts those earplugs in their ears all day long. So it's about accommodating diversity. It's not about being special. And people don't think like that. They still think it's a favor if they get one.
So that somehow people who have a disability have to get the courage and the insight to make clear that they're entitled to certain rights and convey that.
And it's not really courage, it's kind of a different way of thinking about it that comes with being around other people with disabilities and not, not feeling that that's gonna be stigmatizing. That's the whole other thing that keeps people away from each other because they think, oh, I'm not like them. I just can't hear that well, or I just can't see that well, or I just can't walk that well. But I'm not. I don't have a disability. Because there's such stigma attached that a lot of people won't affiliate because of society's strong negative misconceptions about disability. So it's a problem.
Now with your mother was able to really give you things.
I think it was more just going to college and figuring it out then that this didn't have to do with...
But you already had an experience
right.
with her.
With fighting.
Yeah. But what's going through my mind is how much our parents helped to really fight for their children so that they get into the pattern of fighting for themselves.
You're right. I mean, the strongest role models that I know are people who had extremely strong parents. I mean, one parent sued the school system of New York City. One parent helped to sue the Berkeley campus. Strong role models.
So then I guess my next question has to be, I don't know, this may be purely rhetorical as a question, how can parents be reached who don't have this quality or are reluctant to use it when we consider that that's maybe where we have to begin?
For people who are born with disabilities, yeah. What about for all the people who acquire, most people acquire disability later on if they're not born with one. For people who are born with one, I think there have to be very strong parent training networks so that parents help other parents to get this. Because there's some parents who get this, they're natural born fighters, and they can help other people.
Yeah.
Because basically, this is about fighting for rights. And it's not about being nice.
Well, then the disabilities that come later that are not anticipated, there would have to be another way of helping those people to start to protect their own interests.
Right. Right.
So what is there?
It's a good question. I worry about that a lot. Because I see a lot of people who acquire a disability and don't change. They just think, well, this is the way it is. I'm just going to have to stay home. Look at a young person who doesn't have that much, who has trouble walking. They tend to get a scooter or a wheelchair. Older people, you know what they get? They get these stupid, god-awful walkers that are very unfunctional. So, what's that about, It's like, you don't know to ask, so you don't get. I think it's a big problem. Now, the literature says that the baby boom generation is not going to tolerate this stuff, that they're going to be much more demanding about getting what they need. Well, I'm not convinced about that, because I think the baby boom generation still does carry a lot of the same old stereotypes about disability. I think more people will demand, but not nearly enough. So I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder. It really worries me. I don't know what the answer is exactly.
I don't either. I wonder whether medical associations or medical schools could prepare doctors to prepare their patients to be assertive. I don't know.
It's not going to happen in medical schools. I mean, medical schools are in turmoil. The whole medical system, that's not going to happen. We're talking 10-minute hours here. It's not going to have to define a whole new area of patient education where people get this in other ways. Doctors are not going to be the ones
Well,
to give it.
what I was thinking about is what the point of contact would be so that they would know that there should be some searching out for educational resources.
Yeah, and I mean the content and the information superhighways, the internet, where people go to get their medical, people are going to have those skills or they're not going to make it. Even today, you know, you've got something wrong with you. You've got to be pretty clear and sharp about what it is, and you've got to research it. To just oversee that what you get is what you need. So that content is going to have to become much more robust. And maybe by influencing that content, people will be able to ask for what they need. But I don't know.
So you see that this whole computer age and this advanced technology can be a resource for getting people to understand the avenues that are available or that they ought to push for.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a major resource, major.
So that really is an option that has not been so accessible before.
Right, and it's still not accessible to a lot of have-nots, and you know, there's all kinds of public policy push for it to make it accessible. And how fast that happens and what the reality will be is going to be very interesting. Computer prices are coming way down, you know, and I think that in the next 5-10 years, your TV will just come with it. It will no longer be an option. It will be part of your TV system. So that will help.
And younger generations will grow up.
They already are. Yeah.
So there's an advantage to them of having all this technology around.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm very much into it. I had a nightmare a couple years ago. I woke up and I was dreaming that I had made it all up. That none of this existed. No internet, no email, nothing. And I woke up in a cold sweat and I thought, oh my God, what would I do?
Well, I think that is frightening. Mention your web number on this so we have a record here.
www.jikkelly.com.
Yes.
www.jik.com.
Now, do you have any way of knowing how many people access that?
Yeah. There's a little counter on it. So I put it on later so I don't know from the beginning, but yeah.
Okay, so I have not learned myself how to access these things, but we have a doctoral student who's doing the transcription on oral history whose area of interest is disability. And I've given him that number, so he's going to get it not only for himself, but for me too.
Oh, what's his name?
Vince Ortega. I'm not sure whether it's Ortega or... I see him all the time. He works in my office, but I'm not quite sure, except that it begins with an O, what his last name is. I've never called him by anything but his first name.
Okay.
But he may sometime, when he begins to work on his dissertation, give you a call, too. But in fact, it was a comment of his that made me realize that we have no material in our oral histories or even in our archival materials that deals with disability.
Hmm.
Do you know of any organizations that have historical materials that we could have access to?
Well, I was part of a oral history interview on the ADA. They've done a whole oral history on the passage of the ADA out of National Rehab Hospital in Washington, D.C. And they published a book.
Oh,
They did a
did they?
book, yeah.
Do you recall its title?
I got it at home somewhere.
Could you give me a call or send
Right.
me a note? Because
Right.
then I think we should get hold of it, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about organizations like the Westside Center? What do they do with their minutes and historical materials? Do they save them, I hope?
I doubt it.
Do you still have contact with them?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that worries me about newer agencies is that they don't realize the importance of preserving reports and minutes for posterity, and that we would be glad to have them in our archive.
Well, organizations like that are obligated by law to save things for 7 years. But that's it.
And then they're through. Even some of the public agencies.
Spaces at the premium.
Do you think you could persuade them to let us have what they have, and we will catalog it, inventory it, and have it accessible?
Yeah, you might want to contact them directly. I can give you
I
a
could do
number. It's probably easier for you to have direct contact. Just use my name. The current director is Mary Ann Jones, and her phone number is 390-3611. Extension, yeah. Extension 201.
I'll call her.
Tell her we talked, you were on the board.
I get the newsletters, but they don't tell me what is happening through materials that really are valuable for posterity.
I mean, I get hundreds of newsletters a year. I'd be glad to save them, but you wouldn't want them. I mean, they're boxes.
Individuals can't do that.
Boxes.
Yeah, and organizations have difficulty. We sort them. Our archivist does that and can distinguish between what should be saved and what needn't be. And anything that has names of patients, we either put under lock and key, or we prefer not to take those. But those things that really define how an organization started and how it's continued, I think is important. So if you know of other organizations that might be useful in that, we should build up that arena of material.
That's a lot of paper.
Yes, it is.
You'd have to scan it, I think, in order to store it. You couldn't possibly store all that.
Much of it is what we do, and we have it on discs.
I mean, I think I know how to discriminate between what's worth saving and I could throw it in another box and just send it to you now and then.
Yeah.
Especially when I clean out my files. I mean, I have a lot of that stuff.
As things come to you, and you think they might be of some value, if not now, in the future, save them for us.
Actually, what would help me is, the only way you would get me to do this is if you sent me some envelopes with exactly who they should be mailed to and enough postage. I would do that. Otherwise, I know I won't get to it. But I do, every time I go for a file, I clean it out. And there are things that I said, this should be saved, but I'm not going to save it.
No, I can understand that. All right, I'll talk to our collectors and see.
Because I'll be glad that, if I have envelopes self-addressed big enough, I'll do it. Because I know what's really, like last night I looked at a document of a center, their 15th year, it was their annual report, and they went back and they did some interviews of people from year one, important people. And this is in Chicago. Now that document should be saved. I threw it out, but it's still on the floor. I can save it.
Yeah.
But it was an important document. I knew it, but I'm not going to save it.
Well, keep it in mind.
I also have a tape. What we did was,
Oh, have you?
I interviewed people about the beginning of the center, and I do have that tape. So at some point I would give it up, not right now. But it is a tape.
Or we could have a copy made of it.
Yeah.
You would lend it to us.
Right.
That would be good.
I also have video. I have many videos. I have one of different news segments. I have tons of videos. They're really historically significant because of just, little things.
See, videos and tapes are very useful in teaching also.
Yeah, I use them in teaching. I use them.
Do you have a list of what you have? Could I have a copy of the list?
Yeah, I could send it to you by email. It's long.
Yeah. Do you want my email number?
Yeah.
Well, I have two different ones. I can give you the easy one. FLF at Juno, JUNO .com.
Okay.
I have another one through the university, but I always get mixed up on that. It's very long.
Is it LMAC? Yeah. Right.
How, are there some points you would like to make, June, that we have not touched on?
Let's see here. What significant changes have you observed between social work practice and when you entered the field and today? I don't know. I'm too far away from it. I miss not having students. I would still love to have students, but I just, I'm too, I don't have the resources but I miss that a lot. That's the one thing I really miss a lot. I don't think so. I think we covered it.
Okay. I think it's been very instructive to have this, and I think it will be a great addition to our oral history files. That document you have is really primarily to provide a guide to the interview, but we don't try to answer everything on it. In fact, it doesn't even apply to some people who are lay people who are involved.
Right.
All right. We have just recently started to have an oral history use agreement. I sent one to you.
Right.
And would you be willing to sign it?
Sure.
You'll be the first person I've asked to do it.